Hello, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. This is your source for, again, community news about what is going on here in the Kalamazoo community, as well as the state of Michigan, the so called United States, and the rest of the world from a working class perspective, generally calling out the establishment on its BS. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not those of 89.1 WIDR or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may turn out to be. Today, we're joined right off the bat by a longtime community activist, organizer, labor organizer, Bill Farmer. We're going to be talking about a number of different topics. But first, Bill, how are you doing this wonderful Michigan spring afternoon?
It's the sun is out, Andy. I'm pleased to be here. I'm healthy, um, and looking forward to our conversation here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, of course, of course. So I think we're going to start right off the bat. So one of the things that we've talked about quite a bit, a lot of your efforts around Medicare for All, and we're going to be talking about some of the broader issues that tie into that. But um, some of it's kind of funny. So in preparation for today's show, and stay tuned around 1 o'clock. I'm going to be diving into the whole state of disunion address that we had. But I was again, I had to put myself through it and read the transcript from it. This is it was painful in itself. But I realized I started reading the wrong transcript. I was actually reading the State of the Union address from 2020. And it's something that Trump said at the time kind of caught my eye because it wasn't something that I remember the mainstream media really picking up on too much. We probably talked about it on the show, but Trump made it a point to call out, the idea of universal health care. So I thought that might be kind of a good way to start this topic because kind of the way he positioned it is the way that a lot of again corporate voices, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, kind of frame their opposition to things like Medicare for All. So in 2020, and I'm not going to try my Trump impression, it's not very good anyway, but this is what Trump had to say about the idea of universal health care. 132 lawmakers in this room have endorsed legislation to impose a socialist takeover of our healthcare system, wiping out the private health insurance plans of 180 million very happy Americans. To those watching at home tonight, I want you to know we will never let socialism destroy American healthcare. He goes on to say that the legislation would bankrupt our nation by providing free taxpayer funded healthcare to millions of illegal aliens, forcing taxpayers to subsidize free care for anyone in the world who unlawfully crosses our borders. Again, that kind of goes into the whole jingoistic xenophobia thing. But he goes on to say these proposals would raid the Medicare benefits of our seniors and that our seniors depend on while acting as a powerful lure for illegal immigration. Because, Bill, as you know, there's no other country in the world that has universal health care. Um, anyway, he claims that's what's happening in California and other states. Their systems are totally out of control, costing taxpayers vast and affordable amounts of money. So, why don't we start right there? Kind of the devil's advocate who's saying, America can't have Medicare for all because it's going to bankrupt the government and it's too much money. And I know there's a lot of different ways you can tackle that question from, what we actually do spend our money on to, again, what Medicare for all actually would cost. But maybe we could kind of start there, and then after that, we'll talk a little bit more about how you're organizing around it.
It sounds like a plan, Andy. I did not watch either one of his presentations to Congress at either election time, and uh, frankly, I really don't allow him to set the standard or the framework or the context to talk about any social justice issue because, very simply, his issues are a smokescreen to what he really wants to accomplish, which we can all see right now. And that's the wholesale destruction of generations of struggle in protecting working people, Medicare, Medicaid, the support systems for the disadvantaged. So that's it in a nutshell. Um, I'm not afraid of socialism. I think our movement, the social justice movement, has to concentrate and develop tactics and programs that are actually redistributive in nature. And that's where it's at. And that's what Medicare for All and the current pieces of legislation accomplish in one degree to or another. And with that, let's just do an overview of the current status of healthcare reform. There are three pieces of legislation pending at the federal level and one at the state level that I can get into and explain. And we're not only explaining legislation here, but a whole new set of values that I consider revolutionary values that we need to implement in our process of social change. Number one, the most well-researched and studied piece of legislation is called the Expanded Medicare for All Acts. It is both in the House and the Senate. There's at least 107 House co-sponsors of that federal legislation, and I believe 14 out of the Senate. And it became very popular again with Bernie Sanders' campaign efforts in 2019 and 2016. So that legislation is the standard that sets the pattern for new piece of legislation on the federal labor level, called the State-Based Universal Health Care Act, which is also in the House and Senate. The third piece of legislation is right here in Michigan. It's called MyCare. It was originally introduced by Yusuf Rabe, House representative out of the Ann Arbor area, and more recently with Carrie Reingans, D47, a very progressive, future-thinking individual that sees the need for a single payer. So all of those represent the movement for a single-payer healthcare system. Medicare for all of these healthcare systems provide healthcare to everyone, regardless of your status in society. There's no, in this legislation, there's no premiums, there's no deductibles, and there's no co-pays, if you can imagine that happening here. They all combine all the current budgets for healthcare, Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP, all the federal legislation and monies going into that would be pulled into one reservoir of funds. In this, I'm speaking for the Medicare for All Act that would pay free appointed service for all your health care. The decision for your care is between you and your healthcare professional. There's nobody looking over anybody's shoulders. The state-based universal healthcare acts allow access to states to formulate a program to provide healthcare to at least 95% of their population and acquire and ask for waivers of all the federal monies that come into the state to be applied to providing a universal healthcare system within states. It also allows states to join together regionally and provide single-payer healthcare in a number of states close to each other or congruous with each other. And basically, that's the summary of the current status. There are organizations that we are in coalition with within Michigan and nationwide that are working on behalf of this. We don't own TV stations. We don't own radio stations, and we're getting out the word as much as we can. And in Michigan, we're building, and I hope we can cover this before the end of the program. We're building for a major lobbying effort in Michigan on April the 23rd. And anybody interested in that, before the end of this program, I'll give you our contact information to reach out to us to be a part of this. That, Andy, is basically a brief summary of the status of healthcare reform.
Okay, thank you so much. And just to kind of expand some context for the folks at home, and pardon me if this is stuff you've already heard, but again, always like a refresher. Um, you know, it kind of responding directly to some of the criticisms maybe you'll hear from your uncle at the dinner table or whatnot. It was the Congressional Budget Office did a study, found a Medicare for All or single payer system would actually save U.S. taxpayers billions of dollars over the course of I think it was about 10 years. Not to mention, yes, it is universal health care is a given, and literally, I think every other country on the planet. There might be a couple of them that don't, but it has been a long time coming, long time discussion. Going back to the 90s, and then we had kind of the half step with Obamacare, which for our savvy listeners, again, actually was developed in a Republican think tank. It's kind of a it's kind of a stopgap before single payer that would still maintain the health insurance industry, which everyone is happy about, Bill. I don't know if you've heard, but anyway, I was kind of curious. So you're talking about kind of the pivot from, uh, you know, uh, national to the state, and I'm kind of curious. I know you've been working on this issue for a long time, and I was wondering if you kind of tell listeners a little bit around, about kind of the strategy around both pushing at the national and the state level, how that comes to play in an environment where we've really seen, in the aftermath, puzzlingly, in the aftermath of this election, the Democratic Party has really disavowed um, any of its progressive platform planks. Kamala Harris famously in 2020 supported Medicare for All, did not in the most recent election. And Alyssa Slotkin, who responded to the State of the Union address, also has voted against, single payer healthcare system. So, given where we're currently at, could you maybe talk a little bit more about, where we're at? Again, the kind of the problems that we've had organizing at the federal level, and maybe some of the successes we're looking at the state level, and how you think that might play out here in Michigan.
Oh boy, that's a can of worms, but you're hitting the issue right on the head as usual, Andy. What we're talking about is the play between power and money. Um, Money, wealth purchases power, um, and that's their advantage. But we have to, there's no option. We have to go to the working class. We have to go to the people that actually work for a living and produce things and have to face how do they provide for their family, education, health care, drive their automobiles on roads that constantly need repair. Um, and it's a struggle. There's no doubt about it. When the concentration of media is within five corporations, it's hard to fight. And we don't hear on the corporate press about all the rallies and demonstrations. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people are taking to the streets, to the point where the Republican Party has told their representatives not even to hold meetings with their constituents.
We've
So that's
we've
the
got a
fear.
story about Bill Huizenga we're going to talk about later.
Yeah,
But he's ours, and he's one of those. But you
yeah,
go ahead. Sorry.
yeah. He's a part of the problem, like so many are. So getting back to how do we build the movement, and that's the bottom line. Well, there are forces, individuals, threads within the Democratic Party, within the Republican Party, within the independents, within the very liberal. And people from the far left, the DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, are a very good, important element in this. And also all of our grassroots social justice issues that permeate the culture within Kalamazoo and the county. There are good people, conscious people everywhere. We all need a unifying perspective and understanding. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. And it's hard to do, but the issue is the issues. Uh, the and I don't want to get into too much of a criticism of the Democratic Party because it's spinning our wheels, but there are good elements within the party that want to revolutionize the Democratic Party, and we support that. In building the movement, I'm the chairperson of what an organization, it's a 501c4. It's called Michigan for Single Payer Healthcare. That's what we do. We lobby, we organize, and we mobilize to build people's understanding and educate people to the social, political, and economic impact of implementing a single payer system. You made reference to the savings, and everybody makes comment on how expensive it's going to bankrupt us. That is not the right perspective, because every single study, including the Congressional Budget Office, 500 to 700 billion dollars can be saved every year by going to a single payer healthcare system. So what does that mean? It means if we simply went to a single payer, everybody in this country would have health care without deductibles, co-pays, and premiums based on the current benefits of Medicare, of traditional Medicare. That's where that savings can go. Now, let's talk about that 500 and 700 billion dollars. What constitutes that much money? Well, we're talking about profits. When CEOs of corporate healthcare insurance companies make tens of millions of dollars every year, you have the profits. Pfizer, our home drug company here, is now over $1 billion profit entity. Much of that profit has come from our tax dollars, but yet they make a profit on selling prescription drugs to the healthcare industry. So those profits would go into providing actual healthcare. Now, the other piece of this is that since you have 6,000 different healthcare insurance companies and corporations, you have to hire an army of clerical staff to process all these claims and then deal with the thousands of rejections that healthcare corporations put forward. And that would reduce. That's part of the overhead. That's part of the savings. And that's that $500 billion every year of savings that would go right into providing health care. Now, the Medicare For All Acts and these other pieces of legislation provide health care far beyond what current traditional Medicare has. And covers much more of the population and covers everything associated with the human body: mental health, vision, dental, prescription drugs, and then every other care. It even goes into long-term care, which is very expensive and can bankrupt many people. And incidentally, 66% of the bankruptcies in this country are due to healthcare costs. So, Andy, we're actually at war with our healthcare system. It is a quiet war, but studies have indicated 40 to 60,000 people die every year in this country for lack of health care. Now, that should be criminal. And when we meet with legislators, if they don't get on board with providing single-payer health care, they are complicit in the deaths of 40,000 people nationwide. And Michigan shares there's thousands of people that die in Michigan every year for lack of health care. So the bottom line with single payer and these pieces of legislation, it is not based on revenues and profits. It's based on providing health care to our families and our community. Those are the values. And those in this society at this time are revolutionary values that we have to fight for.
No, thank you so much, Bill. And I want to like go back to that idea of like, this is something that like we need to fight for, agitate for. Obviously this historical moment, it's different. Talking about Medicare for All was it was a different thing in 2016, 2020 than it is in March of 2025. And probably, the big difference is we have hypercharged Reaganism. We have people inside the government that are basically trying to strip the copper wiring out of our social safety net. So, I mean, we're on track for Medicare for nobody. if
Mhm.
they had their way, which again, Elon, as we mentioned, he's trying to find savings. There you go. But so it's an interesting time to be talking about this, because again, if everything in like Project 2025 again kind of goes according to their wishes, we could see many like thousands, millions of Americans lose the health coverage that the meager health coverage that they currently have. Um, and I would just kind of ask one, why is it important to remind people of, again, this kind of aspirational, but much needed improvement on the social safety net at a time where it's, being dismantled? And how do you think that can possibly be used as leverage going forward? I want to bring up, Medicare for All is also one of the most popular policy planks. Um, it pulls again by widespread positive margins across both Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. um, do you think that, some of the pain people are going to be feeling, is that going to entrench, the current healthcare status quo? Do you think it's possible that we could use this as a way to fuel people, kind of fire up people uh, back towards the idea of universal healthcare?
Right. Another good question, Andy. That goes to the heart of the building movement right there is what you're talking about. And um, all I can say is, and reinforce what you've already said, there have been studies, as a matter of fact, of people running for office and state legislators, and even lower down the ladder in cities and councils and county councils, that people who speak to um, and part of the platform is Medicare for All win. They win offices. It's and why it's very simple. It affects everybody. Everybody needs it, and everybody is paying through the nose or suffering serious debt in regards to their healthcare coverage. So what do we face right now? What are the objective conditions that we're looking at right now? I personally think um, these this period that we're living in can be a revolutionary period of organizing. And when I speak of revolution, I'm not talking about guns and that, not at all. I'm talking about a revolution of values and morals and doing the right thing. And doing the right thing means taking care of people, of being cooperative with people, being understanding and understanding their needs. And this legislation satisfies all of that criteria. So, what's going on right now, objectively? Well, tens of thousands of federal employees are absolutely being fired for no just cause and being walked out of their doors. And it's just a horrible situation. I wish they would just do a sit down strike, um, but they're doing what they're doing. And they're threatening Obamacare, the ACA. 20 million people have health insurance because of that, even though the structure was a gift to the insurance companies. 20 million people have health care that did not have health care before. If they mess with that, there's going to be movement by people. And that movement will either be guided by existing organizations that have proven themselves to people and that people trust, or it's going to be chaos. And building the movement is giving something for people to look at and gravitate to organizations that are moving in their best interests. And any organization that's fighting for universal health care is going to be one of those organizations, along with all the others throughout the country. And we are not alone. There's tens of thousands of people creating and working on behalf of this movement over the entire country. We're in coalition with a national group called Physicians for a National Health Plan, pnhp.org. We're in coalition with Michigan United, that is organizing a lobby day, like I indicated before, April the 23rd. There's going to be over 300 people in coalition partners of Michigan United, of which Michigan for Single Payer Healthcare is one, and we're building that day by day by day. I fully expect there's going to be over 300 people in Lansing in the halls of our elected officials lobbying for universal health care and better energy, renewable energy, and women's health issues. And I reach out to all of your listeners to help us. Go to our website, Michigan, the number 4, singlepayer.org. Fill out our forms, get in touch with us. We'll get back with you. And while you're at our website, sign our online petitions in support of the legislation that we're talking about right now. So that's the story, and I'm sticking to it. And the more people, the whole process here is we will go through this process. We have to have an architecture of our goal and create a vision of a future that we can all live in that's safe and clean and healthy. Health care is 2 words, health, and then there's care. Care represents to me the social determinants of what constitutes health. And what are they? They're the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food that we eat, the elimination of war in a clean environment. So there is not one single movement that we can't relate to build a mass organization for social justice that has the best interests of everybody in this country, including the state of Michigan. That's what we're about. And that's what we're going to move forward. Our architecture is a better future, a future with universal health care for everybody, not just certain people that can afford it. So join us. Go to that website, fill out our forms, help us on the 23rd. Post 23rd activity, we're going to be approaching our Michigan congressional delegation to get on board. And remember, this is the first step of many steps. We believe in direct actions. And direct actions have proven, not only in American history, to be very effective, but they've proven effective very recently. Look at the UAW strike that they did. That was nationwide and it was selected. Look at the statewide teacher strikes 4 or 5 years ago, Kentucky, Virginia, Tennessee, Colorado. They went on a statewide strike, organized and won every single issue. That's the mobilization that we need. So we work within the electoral process as much as we can, but we don't go down the black hole because we have to build an independent movement for social justice, of which healthcare is a critical part of it.
Kind of thinking through too. A couple follow-up questions about that. What is the date of this mobilization again? I'm sorry.
No, good question. I want to emphasize it too. It's April the 25th of 2025. And the statewide coordinating agent is Michigan United. Go to their website. They are publicizing this now throughout the state. We're in contact and expanding the coalition partners as we move along. Buses will be provided from certain areas that have enough people. There's a fundraising element to this, so we can feed everybody, entertain them, have packets of information. I'm working with various unions. The American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees is involved with this. They're providing their resources. The Michigan Nurses Association, SEIU, and the UAW is supportive of this. So there's very good support, and we really have to flood the offices. We need leaders that take small groups of people to meet with the legislators, and we'll be making copies of all our petitions. We're heading towards 6,000 signatures right now. If you help us, we can make 10,000 very easily, very quickly by going online. And we've passed resolutions throughout the state in support of Medicare for All.
Including right here in Kalamazoo, right?
That's right. I'm so proud of our Southwest Michigan Democratic Socialists of America. They are instrumental in pushing this in the county in Southwest Michigan. We went door to door and had people sign our petitions, and there wasn't a door that was answered that refused signing our petition. The support of this is just phenomenal. We collected over 1,200 signatures during that period of time. It was about 3 years ago. And we presented these to the city commission and the county commissioners. And after some work and education, both bodies passed resolutions of support. Those resolutions will be in our packet that we'll present at the state. So we're very proud of that effort. And that's what you have to do. The question is, how do you educate? How do you reach out? How do you then organize and stay in touch and then mobilize? Mobilize independently for direct action and have as much influence in the electoral area as we possibly can.
Just a quick clarifying question. So the mobilization in Lansing, is the goal to push a universal healthcare system here at the state level, or is it to try to kind of get those politicians to endorse a nationwide Medicare for all, or perhaps both?
It's an opportunity for both, but the specific priority of Michigan United, one of their main priorities is MyCare, which is the state-based single-payer healthcare system, and that's the most relevant body for electoral purposes as our House and Senate. At the same time, it gives us opportunity to educate them about the Medicare for All Acts and also the state-based universal healthcare acts, because the state will have to organize a system to do that. And it folds very nicely with our state, with MyCare legislation. So those are married issues and pieces of legislation.
Okay, and just to kind of bring some folks up to speed who listen to the show, something that popped into my mind was, we had the Democratic trifecta in Lansing for a number of years. I don't think this really got brought up, or it did not appear on Gretchen Whitmer's desk. Do want to remind folks that you can find us at opensecrets.org, but I think one of Gretchen Whitmer's biggest funders in recent elections was Blue Cross Blue Shield. So there might be a reason why this didn't get up there. But I also do want to point out too, that is I don't want that to just sound too cynical, because as grim as things are, I do still very deeply and sincerely believe in the power of mass movements to really make big changes, even when it really seems like the wind is against them. Something that I'm thinking about, I've thought a lot about, as far as healthcare goes, because again, the question might be raised, like, why healthcare, why now? And while we on the show do not endorse what happened in December in New York City, it was interesting to observe in the aftermath that there is at least this rank and file bipartisan not just bipartisan, people of all stripes, political beliefs, is just basically a big grassroots consensus that we are fed up with the healthcare system as it currently exists. And I think it's definitely something. If there's one issue that I think could really unite um, people in this country, despite all of the, again, all of the various culture wars and ways the ruling class is very, in a lot of successful ways divided people over the last, especially 10 years. This is an issue that I think has a potential to really unify and mobilize people in a way that I can't really think of a lot of other issues being able to do. Um, so I want to kind of circle back to that question of mobilizing around healthcare, and particularly with the power of our labor, which is that is the leverage that the working class has. And we've been kind of calling it, Project 2028, but I know you're probably familiar with, how Sean Fain he's trying to encourage other unions to set their renegotiations to 2028 so that we could trigger a potential general strike. As somebody I know you've kind of had your foot in kind of both, DSA work and labor organizing work. Do you see that as a potential vector, like one of the potential things that we could, uh, because again, there hasn't really been a lot of talks about the nuts and bolts of what this general strike would look like and what the demands would be. But do you think that we could be in a place in the labor movement to make that one of the kind of the central demands of a big, Project 2028 general strike?
Absolutely. I don't think there's any doubt about it. There is growing support for what Sean Fain, the president of the UAW, has challenged the labor movement in the greater society to think about and plan the execution of a general strike in May 1 of 2028. Michigan for Single Payer Health Care supports that. Democratic Socialists of America supports that. The UAW is working in their own way in regards to that. There's major machinist unions that are in support there's a lot of discussions going on. The National Flight Attendants Union, and I have forgotten her name. Forgive me, Sarah. She's the president of the Flight Attendants Union. She's in support of this. And incidentally, I happened to listen to Sean Fain speak at a Labor Notes conference in Chicago. And just for your information, 4,700 militant unionists attended this conference. And Sean gave a talk and spoke to their plan for a general strike, of which universal health care would be an issue, along with minimum wage or minimum income so people can actually live a life here in the United States. So it's in discussion. I think just projecting that out into space and having people think about that is a progressive step to actually accomplishing that. And we're pushing it. Whatever meeting that we have, we're mentioning that because that is a trend in American history. And if you figure, we are not educated on the history of struggle in the United States on the grassroots level that has accomplished all the benefits that we've had. We're not taught that in school, and there's a reason for that.
It's kind of why there's been a big attack on education from this administration too.
Exactly. There was a school teacher that taught this in the Midwest or in the Southwest, and I forgot what state it was. And it led to a vibrant student body that held protests on the food that they eat. So they get more organic, fresh foods at lunch and other things. And it was totally shut down. He lost his job. They're restructured. So it's very threatening to know how to defend your rights and expand them. And that's what's important. We're not only defending the rights that we have to expanding. That's what democracy is. It's a growing, evolving, gradual process. And history shows this, and I'm talking human history, that the struggle has always been to control as much as possible the resources upon which we live. Um, and we're here today doing the same thing.
Yeah, I think it's important to also note too that health coverage is itself a labor issue outside of everything. It's because of the peculiarity of the United States not having a universal healthcare system. It's something that the bosses can use to leverage against the workers. So again, having a universal healthcare system would be one less thing for again the ruling class to leverage over the working class.
No, Andy, you're just hitting the head of the nails with every comment. Now, um, I retired in 2015 from being a collective bargaining and arbitration specialist with the American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees, all public sector. So I've negotiated hundreds of contracts with public employees, hospitals, cities, counties, libraries, the full spectrum. And every single set of negotiations, the monster at the table was healthcare. Its costs, how to pay for it, what manipulations can we do for this and that. And the bottom line, inevitably, was more and more of the costs of healthcare was put on the backs of our employees, of our union members, which impacted the living wage that they were able to accrue in order to live a life. So, what this is an excellent point for organized labor. Every single contract in this country has reopener language that is kicked in automatically if any state or federal law impacts any part of the contract language, whether it's benefits or just contract. We went through this with MyOSHA, OSHA, the Family Medical Leave Act. All of our contracts opened up and we negotiated the impact of this legislation. Now, for organized labor, can you imagine single payer goes into effect? It saves the employers millions of dollars in healthcare costs. You will not be paying for those premiums and deductibles anymore. So your spendable income goes up by, on average, $5,000 to $6,000 every year, plus all those sets of negotiations that you gave up a quarter here and 50 cents there and 75 cents years ago to pay for health care becomes items on the negotiating table to distribute within your contract or deal with in some fashion. So this is an opportunity. Now, some unions, like the building trades, construction unions, have health care that spans multiple states sometimes in jurisdictions. That has to be worked out. That has to be protected. The hotel and restaurant workers out west, in Vegas and so forth, have a wonderful healthcare system where they've developed clinics throughout their regions for people to go to. That all has to be respected and worked out. But this legislation is universal and a benefit to everybody in the country. There's some items that need to be worked out, but over time, it'll be done. The people that might lose their jobs in healthcare because we're eliminating the clerical staff that processes claims, there are projections after a couple of years of adjustment that healthcare will actually be a job creation avenue, and some studies indicate as many as just over 2 million jobs will be created through single payer because the emphasis will become servicing communities that are in healthcare deserts, whether they're in the rural areas or in our urban areas, because healthcare will no longer be based on the largest profit margin, but delivering a service to community. So there you have it.
So I had a question for you, and this is this is on my mind when you first hit me up about wanting to come on the show. As somebody who's kind of you've had your feet planted both in organizing the DSA and in labor organizing. And something that I've thought about, at least, especially at the Kalamazoo level, is, back in 2016, I remember 17 Trump years, there was a lot of conversations among like the various like social justice groups in Kalamazoo about like, oh, we're all in silos. And I think we've done a pretty effective job of networking with each other and being able to mobilize quickly and communicating. Maybe we're all a little bit tired. Late stage capitalism is a marathon, not a sprint. However, I do see that maybe that connection between some of Kalamazoo's like community organizing groups and all that, and organized labor in Kalamazoo. Maybe they're still a little kind of in two separate bubbles. And I think that is probably going to be the task of the next 4 years, especially if we are looking at a big labor mobilization in 2028. So I wanted to ask, as somebody who, again, has had their feet planted in both worlds, what can labor organizers, community organizers do in Kalamazoo to build those necessary bridges we're going to need for the struggles ahead?
Talk to each other. Bottom line, this, and you've mentioned several times I'm a long-term organizer, but I tell you what, I'm learning every day, and then relearning things that I knew decades ago. And you're bringing up a really good point, and that I just reached out just recently to our area labor council, um, and I should have been in contact with them right along. So building what's happened again, the objective conditions that we face today has led to new organizing and new organizing surges. And I've been in discussions and I've talked to people in community. We're reestablishing relationships that we've had for quite some time, but fell in abeyance for whatever reason. Um, but we're reawakening. There's some discussion of calling a summit, um, a social justice summit here in Kalamazoo that would involve Southwest Michigan. Um, so you're bringing up what's going on, and Kalamazoo. We've got to give credit to Kalamazoo that there's very well organized social justice groups here that have been existent for years. And KNOW is a good example. Great people, great organization, great theory, and great tactics that needs constant support. And it does a good job here. And I'm glad you brought up Sarah Nelson. And she's one of the big supporters of the general strike in 2028 and is working with the UAW in regards to that. She's the head of the Association of Flight Attendants, who's affiliated with the Communication Workers of America. I want to just, if I may, bring up something. Some years ago, about 6 years ago, I, in a group of other people, went to Livonia, and there was a 3-day workshop, and the workshop consisted of train the trainers. 3 days, we learned how we got to this point, and in the evolution of our economy and legislation, and it really explains how the the election came about and the forces that created the situation that we're facing right now. And the workshop is called Reversing Runaway Inequality. And I just want to put it out to the community that we have trained workshop facilitators here. I'm one. I've done these facilitations in Michigan, Indiana, and Iowa and Illinois. And it's a really study of our economic evolution and how our lives are really being stolen by neoliberalism. And I know neoliberalism is a big word, but basically it's the privatization of every sector of life that we involve ourselves in, including healthcare. Um, Healthcare is now owned and operated by major investors, not just healthcare insurance corporations, but major investors. And why is that? Number one, healthcare represents almost 20% of our national budget expenditures throughout the year. That's $3 trillion, and that's a lot of profit. So we're up against that. When we talk about building a movement, there's a lot of money that's being used against us. And believe it or not, the profits that are made from healthcare, when you go to the doctor and you pay for that, and the insurance company gets that money, or drugs and they get that money goes back to these corporations. And guess where a portion of that goes? It goes to fund legislators and get them elected that do their bidding, not ours. So it's ironic, isn't it? The profits gleaned from our labor is then used against us in the electoral process. It needs a change.
Yeah, and I just with kind of the put a fine point on neoliberalism. I know a lot of our listeners are justifiably scared about everything that's going on right now, but it's not necessarily new, and it's kind of the end game of neoliberalism, because like the through line from Reagan to both Bushes, Clinton, Obama, and Trump is privatizing, like dismantling the state and privatizing everything. And kind of what we are seeing right now is kind of the attempt to drive a stake through the coffin of again, any sort of social safety net, and parcel it out to the highest bidder. um and as I think you've mentioned, and really eloquently, is like, you know uh for the time being, I do think the working class is still very much in the driver's seat. Now, this push for AI and stuff, I know a lot of these tech billionaires want to like put us in a state of techno feudalism, which I'm that's a whole other conversation. But for at least right now, I really think we are still in the driver's seat. We really need to spend these next couple of years taking the wheel. And I think as people see the crisis unfold, one thing I should mention about DSA that you're a part of, I remember going to meetings at the Vine Neighborhood Association. There was like 8, 10, 12, 16 of us. Every meeting since Trump's election has been like something like 80, 100. I think at one meeting y'all had like 120 people. So it is a moment. People, you may not see it reflected in the corporate press, but there is like a very real resistance out there that I think is creating the fuel for these types of very big struggles ahead. I wanted to pivot and ask you a little bit about an event that happened over the weekend. The Kalamazoo City Commission did its budget retreat, and I'm sorry I didn't ask if you were there, you participated. But I know that's something that DSA was doing. But maybe could you talk a little bit about where you think the city's priorities are and where they need to be, especially again in this moment where I've often said the city of Kalamazoo is maybe like socially progressive but economically Ronald Reagan. And you know maybe if you could talk about like kind of why the DSA sought to put pressure on them there, and maybe some of your own thoughts about what we can do to pressure the administration of the city to align with these goals.
Okay, Andy, you're hitting a lot of topics here, and I'll try and do my best. I was not at the rally the other day at the Foundry. I was home taking care of business at home. You can only do so much.
That's
And I
fair.
just want to say that you cannot be the movement, you can be a part of it. And you have to measure what you can and what you can't do. That's one thing that I didn't, but I respect and I supported uh, people gathering there to have influence and pressure the city and moving in a direction that better takes care of the community, including those who are houseless in the community. and or disadvantaged. We DSA has grown, as you said. After the election, we had close to 100 people at the meetings, and every meeting since we've had 50 people that are entering into groups to actually do things here. First of all, I think there's some good folks on the city commission that want to do the right thing. And this is an overture to them. They have to work within the framework of their budget. And because of neoliberalism and the structure and its impact, they're on limited dollars. They only have a certain amount. But having said that, they can still take strong positions and do funding, which they did. They added some extra money for taking care of the houseless to move into motels in the area as a function of a presentation that DSA did at the city commission. And kudos to the city for listening. Kudos for DSA for sticking to it and holding people accountable. That needs to continue, and it needs to be continued to build. And it's just, and I want to get back to neoliberalism.
Oh, of course. Yeah. We like talking about, well, we don't like talking about on the show, but
the thing
it's important to talk about.
Is cities and counties' budgets are starved for money. There's no doubt about it. And I might say that if a single payer went in effect, they'd have tens of thousands, if not millions of dollars. They would be no longer paying for health care for their employees if single payer went through. Now, what is done with that money is a different story. It could go into providing more services. For example, the city and or county, separately or together, could provide health care, a basic health care, with no copays or deductibles. That's a possibility. There's experiments in Ohio that are moving in that direction that have been successful so far. So that's something that could be considered. DSA has also proposed shelter, year-round shelter for people to go into without criterion. So if it's cold, they have the shelter to go in. That needs to be supported by the city. And I think it will be. The campaign for public restrooms is a successful campaign. It just needs to be executed. So there is movement by the city, but that movement came from direct action from the community. And that's what needs to be continued and built upon. And I look forward to helping that out as much as I can. DSA is doing a great job. I want to mention something else. We have a mutual aid working group that has fed the houseless for the past 3 years every Friday. We need help continuing that, and more people are helping. There's an effort to get more services during that period of dinner with some minor healthcare triage. So that's growing. We're developing a healthcare working group that has 50 people signed up to help in that regards. I hope to funnel them into partially the events for April the 23rd and kick that off, and to organize here in Kalamazoo and mobilize for direct actions in Southwest Michigan, especially with the representative we have currently representing us in
Congress. Kind of lack of representation.
Yeah. So I hope that answers part of your question. And ready for anything else you got, brother.
Okay, well, I think too we've still got a little. If you're okay sticking around for some extra innings, so we've got some other subjects I know we wanted to talk about. So kind of springing off of this, I know another thing DSA recently organized. You did some work with the Cope Network, doing some Narcan trainings. I've also worked with them in the past in my capacity as a socialist and former organizer of underground basement shows in the Vine. And it kind of links back to I know you mentioned wanting to talk a little bit about the opioid crisis, and I thought it loops back into again, it is a uh, the opioid epidemic is an epidemic of despair, and particularly when we have a state that is in just very much invested in disinvesting in a lot of these public structures that try to mitigate those sorts of epidemics. What are your thoughts on the connection between, again, we've talked about neoliberalism a lot here, and the ongoing opioid epidemic, how it could, get worse under this current administration, and what kind of mutual aid and community interventions we can organize to try to address that.
Mm, another good question, Andy. And the answer is multifaceted. Number one, the presentation from the Cope Network was excellent, and I want to speak to values. Um, their values that they presented are the same values that social justice movements fight for every day in their existence, and those are based on cooperation, compassion, listening, and based on listening, formulate some kind of structure to help galvanize and mobilize. It's not based on building a criminal justice system that puts people in jail, but helps people at where they're at right now and affords them the best opportunity based on their needs and listening to them of the best treatment and process to bring them where they want to go. And it's basically creating a better future based on their particular needs and how they view the best processes to do that. And that's what social justice movements do. That's what Medicare for All does, single payer. Our values are based on cooperation and service to the community, not revenues and profits. Revenues and profits is the namesake of neoliberalism. It is the perspective of how much can I get out of this individual, exploit this individual as best as I can for my own personal gain. And that's on an individual basis, and that's on a corporate investment basis. They don't care about community. We do. And that's the future and the values that we have to work and be a part of and build within our own organizations, and being absolutely open, being absolutely accessible to the underprivileged group, to those communities of color, to every facet of society. And that's how we move forward. We have to create the future of good common welfare right here and right now. And I think we're doing that.
Another thing I wanted to talk to you about, that we kind of mentioned bringing up here on the program. So we've talked a lot on the show about another epidemic in the U.S. About mass shootings, and
Mm.
there's the obvious thing. My co-host, who I don't think they'll be joining us today. They might, but they do a lot of work on gun violence prevention. And something we always talk about too is kind of the relationship between, as Marx said, capitalist alienation and the epidemic of mass shootings. Now, granted, the news cycle has kind of been gobbled up by everything going on at the Trump administration right now. But what do you think, again, like something that I always go back to is, America has always this has always been a culture that has been heavily armed. But it's this sort of random violence we've really seen ratchet up in the last 30 years or so. What are your thoughts on the relationship between kind of, the economic system that exists in the United States and again, the sort of again the very uniquely American problem of mass shootings that we see literally almost every day.
Mass shootings more in this country than any country, other country in the world. An opioid epidemic that kills 100,000 people every year on average. Um, Everything that you just mentioned is, I believe, a function of how people are alienated from each other because of our economic structure. It's the private accumulation of capital that is squandered for self-interest with no regards to social responsibility in providing decent lives to the people who actually create the wealth and do the work in this country. I think those are all symptoms of what Marx alluded to in alienation. And he spoke, as others have, that the alienation isn't only that of psychology, your separation from work because it's redundant, repetitive, without meaning in enriching the soul in self-actualizing, but it's the alienation too of the actual value of the work that we do, because profit is a part of the value that we create and we do not benefit from it. That's why our movement is redistributive in nature. That profit that we've created has to go in. Those, when I say profit, that's our lives. That's our working lives for our family, for our community. That money, that wealth that we've created has to go back into the community, and that's what redistribution of wealth means. So, all those symptoms are tragic symptoms: alienation, loneliness. There is an excellent book called Weathering by an academic out of the University of Michigan. And it's a study of the physiological, chemical, biological effects of stress on the human body and the human mind. And it's generational in nature. So it perpetuates. So we can understand within that context slavery and the effects of slavery from generation to generation within the context of a racist society that doesn't permit access to wealth gaining endeavors like buying your own home or getting a wage or a job that's livable. So, absolutely, I think a lot of our issues are generated by the values of our economic system, which are not wholesome. They're, in fact, destructive. That's why I put it within the context of we are at war with our healthcare system, but we are actually at war with our economic system because it's denying us our individual freedoms and our collective freedom to be a more democratic, wholesome society.
All right, thank you, Bill. I also want to point out, so Lawrence is joining us on the program. Lawrence, how are you this afternoon? Sorry. Uh, Lawrence, you there?
Yo, hello, hello.
Hey, hey. How are you doing today, Lawrence? Good to have you on the show.
Hey, yeah, I'm good to be heard, man.
All right. So, I was gonna say so. Bill, you're welcome to stay on with us if you'd like. I know me and Lawrence are gonna kind of dive into State of the Union stuff, but if you'd like to make your leave now, that'd be fine too. What do you think?
I think I'm going to take my leave, but
Mhm.
before I do, I just want to say, Andy, thank you for so much being you and the service to the community that you've provided for years. And thank you for this opportunity to share what we've been going on. And I know the future that you want to build is the same that we all want to build. So thank you so much.
Okay. Well, thanks again, Bill, for taking time to be on the show with us today. And yeah, again, everybody, that's April 25th.
April 25th 3rd.
April 23rd.
And
Sorry.
the website is Michigan, the number 4, singlepayer.org.
All right. Thank you, Bill. So Lawrence, yep. Thank you, Bill. Have a good one. So Lawrence, let's get right into it. I know we have some limited time with you. Thanks for taking time out of your day to talk about everything that's been going on the last week. But Lawrence, we kind of start. I was thinking kind of partition this out either State of the Union or everything else. So do you want to start with State of the Union or everything else?
Uh, Man, yeah. So I mean, there's been a lot that's happened since the last time we talked. The economy has crashed, right? Um, Multiple outlets is saying this is the worst economic crash since '09, since the Great Recession. Um, yeah, this is our president, 47, decided to do an hour and some change long address to the country, full of lies, full of demagoguery, full of just felonious assaults on the truth.
Absolutely felonious. Goodness.
Like
Yeah.
yeah, like it was it was we've covered multiple state of the union state like just addresses to Congress when Bibi Netanyahu addressed Congress. We've seen people protest, and I thought it was interesting. What 47 said wasn't interesting. He didn't say anything that was interesting outside of spewing lies about him having a mandate, him lying to the American people that he's not going to cut Social Security or Medicaid, which they're going to do so. They're planning on doing so. Their bill that passed the House of Representatives that went to the Senate.
Yeah, Trump is
Uh,
like he's like Project 2025 is like the drunk cousin that like says everything that they're up to out loud. It's like, I don't know that guy. I've never met him in life. It's
yeah,
like, Donnie, we were gonna break down this
no,
federal
no,
government
no.
next week. Shut up.
Project 2025. No, Project 2025 is literally Epstein, when Epstein said that Trump was friends with them for over, they've been best friends for the last
Yeah.
10 years.
Mhm.
He said that and wasn't afraid of it. He said that, yeah, I know everything that's going on in the cabinet. He tells me. So, and they're doing it like that. So the speech wasn't interesting.
It
If you
was
want to go back and
boring.
watch,
Yeah. So
if you want to
I
go
didn't
back,
watch it. I don't subject myself
I
mentally to
did.
that stuff. I
I
read the
did. I watched
transcript.
I watched the whole
And
thing.
yeah, I
It
skimmed
was,
through a lot of it. It's like in addition to being fascist, it was also very long and boring. Even some of the Republicans
bro,
complained about it.
it
Uh,
was. I had to watch it on 2.5 times speed
yeah,
because of how long and boring it was. Like they let him do it. They let him do a Trump rally speech. They let him do a Trump rally speech. Now here's the thing. Shout out to Representative Green, Al Green.
yes. Hmm.
Uh, he was the only one who protested in the right way, holding signs, wearing pink, sitting there while this man spews compute garbage and sitting there quietly the way that the minority leader said to do so, because that was the proper way of protesting. That's not a protest, that's a parade.
Hmm.
If your protest is okay by those who are in power, that is not a protest, that's a parade.
I think it when your own base, and I'm not even talking about like leftists like us. I mean, like when your base that is like the middle class liberal Democrat, blue no matter who people are mad at you because you're not doing enough. That is just the absolute like
Yeah. So
it's
I want to, because I want to,
yeah.
because the reason why I wanted to bring up Representative Al Green, because two Representative Greens protested and interrupted speeches. Only one of them got censured.
That's right. Remember back to what
And
is it?
and
2020.
and they were censored, and they had 10 Democrats that helped censor him. Now here's my thing.
Censure. Oh yeah.
Now here's my thing. If I was in the House of Representatives, I'm glad that I don't wield power and that I'm not in the House of Representatives. Because if I was, I would get censured all the time. I really would. Like
Yeah.
it would, it would, it would be a daily occurrence. I would have the most. I'll be the one representative that has been censored the most out of everybody because of how many times I will be calling out BS. Right.
Mhm.
But the fact that he took up airtime, he took up space, he brought it back to the thing that every American need to know, that one, he does not have a mandate. He got a plurality. He did not get the majority. He got a
Yeah.
plurality, and also he
Just
doesn't have a
a
mandate.
quick
So bring
remind
it
the
back
whole
to
mandate
policy.
thing, because like I basically went through and made some notes, and if by the way, if folks want like a line for line fact check, I think the best one I've seen is maybe the BBC one. New York Times maybe, but it's again very centrist, as one would know. But like the whole mandate thing, just a reminder, he doesn't have a mandate for squat. The majority of voters who voted in that election voted for somebody else, whether it was Kamala or a third party or wrote in Mickey Mouse or whatever. Less than a
Yep.
third of Americans actually voted for him. And as we've said, the couch, if sitting on the couch was on the ballot, which is to say people who didn't decided not to vote, non-voters would have won in a landslide. So this
Yeah.
again an election. The vote of no confidence was the one with the
Was
mandate. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. So that means that brings me to the Democratic response. Okay, so that brings me to the multiple responses.
Yeah.
Shout out to the people who did fantastic responses.
Mm-hmm.
Bernie Sanders
Bernie.
with
Yeah.
multiple million view response, which
Mm-hmm.
was which hey, you need to there was a lot of slurring. There was some slurring. I think I don't know what's going on with Bernie, but his the content and everything that he was saying was fantastic. Nina Turner's response was fantastic. AOC not being there, wonderful, and giving detailed responses to the lies, fantastic. You want to know who didn't do a good job of responding to
Oh
Trump's
boy.
garbage? Melissa Slockins. Yo,
Michigan's
yo,
own.
yo, yo, Slockins, please come to the
Ugh.
front of the congregation. We need to have a chat.
Okay,
Um,
so I want to deep dive into Slotkin's response. I did have a couple other things. This ties into what I'm going to say about Slotkin, though. So, one of the things that I thought was interesting about Trump's speech was again his propensity to um, he apparently beated a version of Biden that does not exist. He talked about a Joe Biden who he was the worst president in U.S. history. I personally think that's maybe Andrew Jackson or Trump, but maybe George W. Bush. He killed a lot of people. But he talked about the Green New Scam. This is something a lot of Republicans are doing. It's like we're defunding the Green New Deal. Green New Deal never happened. The Democrats never like endorsed Nancy Pelosi, who in the conservative imagination is like the Queen Democrat, called it like the Green New Dream disparagingly. Um, also, uh, you know, uh, he goes on to talk about how Biden was against oil and gas leases. No, actually, he like oil and gas leases expanded under Joe Biden. Um, and he talked about Joe Biden just opening up the borders. Joe Biden's opening up the borders. The Biden administration, we're deporting more people on a daily average than the current Trump administration currently is. In fact, you can see white nationalists whining about this on Twitter. They're like, why aren't our numbers as good as Joe Biden, who apparently was just letting people out of insane asylums, according to Trump. So what I'm basically trying to say is like Trump is and the GOP more broadly are positioning there's a rhetorical reason they do this. because most Americans actually like progressive policy. Things like Medicare for All, which you just spent an hour talking to Bill about, and Green New Deal, all this stuff polls really well with most Americans, including most Republicans, when you just talk about the policy. So what they do is they try to tag these popular policies to unpopular politicians, like Joe Biden, even though it doesn't make any sense. I really wish I could have voted for the Joe Biden that exists in the GOP's imagination. He sounded like a pretty rad leftist, but unfortunately, that man was never president. And that's a fact check you're not going to get from the New York Times. And further, just one other thing about the whole immigration thing, and I know I'm a broken record on this, but I got to say it every time. It is the Democratic Party. It really falls on the Democratic Party for capitulating to this big lie, because study after study, including conservative studies from places like the Cato Institute, prove time and time again, proportionally, illegal immigrants undocumented immigrants do commit less crimes than native-born citizens. But rather than being an opposition party that says, no, actually, that's fake news, you say, oh yeah, that's true, and we're going to be even tougher on the border while still, like, I don't know, giving people pillows or something. That does not work. And it's infuriating to see the double lie where the two last Democratic administrations were particularly brutal to immigrants, and we have Trump acting like they were, some sort of like loosey goosey open borders types. Now, that would have been, from my leftist standpoint, that would have been fantastic. But they weren't. They absolutely were not. And we got to keep in mind a lot of this is about historical erasure. And just one other last point before we talk about Slotkin, transgender life. As somebody with half a brain who does a radio podcast, that made me reach for a beer or a stronger drink, because again, it's transgenic mice. For those who don't know, that's um, they alter the genes on lab mice so that they more closely sync up with the human genome, so that they can run experiments on again medications, chemicals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, again, what the Trump administration is doing, and what was pointed out by a lot of activists on the big science day thing, was them pointing out how they will take these things out of context, things that they don't understand because they're too dumb to understand them, and so like, see how we're wasting money, when actually, like, the studies involving transgenic mice actually field like really important data in the field of medicine and so on and so forth. And it's just, again, it's we are run by people who are evil and stupid, and sometimes it's hard. You're just morally outraged and just frustrated at the same time. These people being so dumb, so dumb.
Like I said, we are ran by the penguin and his goons. We are ran by that's the government that we have. That the penguin from the DC universe somehow got another multi-millionaire to fund his campaign, and that's what we have. Like,
Are we talking about
so
like the recent Penguin show on HBO, or like the '60s Burgess
no,
Meredith
no,
Penguin?
no. I'm talking
No.
no. I'm talking about no. I'm talking about like I said, Danny DeVito. It is
Oh yeah,
Danny
Danny
DeVito.
DeVito.
So
Yeah,
here's the thing. So this
yeah,
is
that
this is
that
the
that
problem.
fits.
This is the problem. How do you respond? The official Democratic response with Alicia Slotkin
Ugh.
praise Ronald Reagan. I want to remind everybody, Ronald Reagan gave immigrants amnesty. If Ronald Reagan's policy towards immigrants was talked about as a serious policy for America today, he wouldn't get past a Democratic Party primary. If we're
No.
talking about that issue, so wait, and also, so she praised Reagan, she praised Bush. Those two presidents that helped dismantle that help dismantle uh uh that help harm this country in some of the worst ways possible, and we have a Democrat praising them. The issue that the Democratic Party has, and this is just my analysis, is that they took the wrong, they continue to take the wrong information from the last few elections. The right wing has gone fascist. This is a right wing cult that will do whatever the dear leader says, either if that's the shadow president Musk or if that's Trump. The Democratic Party is like, no, we're the same ones, but we're moderate Republicans. No,
Yeah.
that is not how you fight fascism. This particular woman, Slockins, has voted to confirm all of Trump's cabinet picks.
Oh, yep.
Why?
Yep.
Why did you confirm all of his cabinet picks? You wanted to show that you're actually willing to fight back against fascism. Why did you fight to install all of the nutcases? Not one. You couldn't vote against one. You couldn't vote against RFK. You couldn't
Yeah.
vote against Marco Rubio.
And
You
again, the
couldn't vote
Democratic
against.
Party picked this woman specifically to deliver the party
But
response.
she states that she went into the military because of 9/11. So you're saying that you wholeheartedly swallowed the propaganda that brown and black folks, that in countries that did not attack us, you wanted to be a CIA operative to go into those countries and dismantle those governments. Great,
Oh,
fantastic,
Lord.
wonderful. That means you are a warmonger like Liz Cheney. You are
Yeah.
she was picked by Liz Cheney. And that's another one of the things that I'm like, why? Why are Democrats helping her? Why?
Everything
What?
about that speech was like tailored for this mythical moderate Republican voter that those were the waterfalls they were chasing in the last election and in 2016. And like there's nothing, it is not worked. The two times or the three times the Democrats have won in the last 30 years is by prompt making at least fainting to their progressive left. Obama, again, in practice, he wasn't that progressive, but he made progressive promises in his campaign. And a lot of us forget in 2020, Biden, a big reason he won is because he actually listened to people like Bernie Sanders and incorporated some of those policies into his platform. Again, not particularly successful in some of those things, but those were the presidents that won. Yet there's this Democrat consultant class with perpetual amnesia, and I don't know. I guess money makes you a little stupid too. That keeps thinking this is the winning strategy, even though every time they have run like this since Bill Clinton, they have fallen on their face. Um, and especially just the way Slotkin was talking about it, it's like I grew up with a Democratic and a Republican, and shared values, and it's appealing
Now
to this.
you
Yeah,
you want to know what was what made that speech even worse? When you look at the things that that speech has in common with Trump's, neither one of them talked about Medicare for all. Neither one of them talked about free college and tuition. Neither one of them talked about uh, um, an actual comprehensive immigration reform. Neither one of them talked about any of the issues that the majority of the people want. That is why that speech fell on its face. There was no vision for the future or what to fight for.
it's
That was the
also
problem.
it's
But
related
but
to
Andy, I gotta go.
another. Oh, you do?
I
You have
gotta
to
go.
go? Okay. All right,
All right,
Lawrence. Well,
how'd you?
thanks for giving your 2 cents. I wanted to cite too, on that particular topic. This isn't an isolated incident where somebody like Alyssa Slotkin is being elevated. This is really where a lot of the core of the Democratic Party is at. This happened actually. Well, last week it was reported from Politico that a bunch of third way Democrats, they are the descendants of like kind of the Democratic Leadership Council and the Blue Dog Democrats of the 80s and 90s that led into Clintonism. And they had like a strategic retreat uh, in one of the richest counties in America about how they should tweak the Democratic Party strategy moving forward. And basically it's the most like schizophrenic document I've ever seen, because it's like they draw some correct conclusions, but they completely misdiagnose, seemingly on purpose, the underlying problem. So they're disconnected from working class voters, but it's because of wokeism. It's because they need to be more masculine. That means they need to be more patriotic. They need to avoid an anti-capitalist stance, and they need to stop demonizing wealth and corporations. Even the quote unquote populist right, to the extent that they are able to pull the wool over people's eyes, they criticize quote unquote woke corporations. There is a hunger for anti-corporate, anti-capitalist critique, and these overpaid consultants, it's hard, it's kind of say, it's like, are these people just that stupid, or are they that far gone in their own ideological rabbit hole? And it's a little of both. They are paid to think this way, so it's not going to occur to them to try to think in the strategic framework of, say, a Bernie Sanders, again, is still the most popular politician in America. But basically, it makes very clear that their vision of the Democratic Party is one that's pro-capitalist, pro-corporate, preferential to big donors over small ones. In fact, there's a part of their strategy document saying they need to stop the dominance of small donors. I'm kind of curious when they thought small donors dominated. When was this? When they dominated the Democratic? This is news to me. I had no idea that the small donors had won out at any point. But again, this is part of a pathology. This is how the Democratic Party is thinking, because let's compare and contrast. The last time, about a century ago, we were in this historical moment. Fascism was on the rise across the globe, but so were progressive and labor movements. We had Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who kind of stood up and decided to basically tell the rich that, yo, it's me or the pitchforks. You're gonna have to improve the social safety net if you do not want, say, like what happened in Russia to happen over here. This time you have a ruling class that did not allow an FDR like figure to come to the table and negotiate with the ruling class. We have a ruling class that is far too comfortable and far too confident that there will never be any repercussions for their behavior. So they squashed an insurgent social political movement, i.e., the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2016 and 2020, that could have challenged this resurgent fascism on its own terms, on terms that historically have been shown to work in favor of dragging around the shambling corpse of Clintonism and the sort of like conservative, middle class, upper middle class Democratic constituency that just does not work anymore in the realm of electoral politics. But when given the choice between that and the very kind of minor social democratic reforms represented by like Bernie Sanders and that campaign, the choice was keep shuffling that out. And in fact, as we're seeing now, pivots to the right to be what the GOP was 20 years ago, to emulate George W. Bush, who was literally one of the most unpopular presidents in modern history. There's few things that Democrats, Republicans, and independents all agree on. One of them is that George W. Bush sucked. His administration sucked. Nobody wants to go back to that. And yet you have Alyssa Slotkin waxing nostalgic about the good old days being in the CIA under George W. Bush. I hope y'all listened to the section where I was talking with Bill, because, folks, that is our way out. And, I know we've had guests on our show talk about, Liano, our good friend Liano, talk about inside-outside strategy. And there are also other currents going on in the Democratic Party. They just elevated somebody to national leadership with close ties to the labor movement. But this sort of hemming and hedging on the continuous kowtowing to the donor class and this pivot rightward um, is indicative of the Democrats are not going to fix themselves anytime soon. And it is going to be up to social movements to both fight back against the resurgence of fascism and to demand the kind of world that we are owed. And we don't got a ton of time to do it, but Democrats aren't coming to the rescue. They're going to hold up paddles during a speech. And when one of them actually does speak up, well, they're going to censure them. We're going to take a quick little break, come back. I've got some good news I want to close out the show with. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org, your source for political revolution. Hello again, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. We've got about 10 minutes. I wanted to close out with some good news. We didn't have enough time to really dive into this on the show, but I did want to, again, address what just happened at Columbia University. Mahmoud Khalil, somebody who lives legally in the United States with a green card, their wife is a U.S. citizen, has been taken by immigration or by the state. And essentially has been told that his green card is going to be revoked, essentially for protesting against the genocide in Gaza last year as a campus activist. He was detained by ICE on Saturday. And obviously, I think we are all shuddering at the implications this has for anybody in this country and their constitutional rights, especially any state can say, well, we didn't like what you're saying, so yeet, and or yeet him into a facility in Louisiana, as it were. Anyway, there is a very good article from Democracy Now talking more about that. But for our part, solidarity with Mahmoud, Khalil, their family. We hope that they can get out soon. This infringement of the First Amendment is sufficiently battled against. But I want to close out the show with a little bit of good news because that can be kind of scarce nowadays. This comes to us from Aaron Reed, who is one of the foremost independent journalists tracking trans issues in the United States. This is published on March 6th. And it shows how, again, I think this is a great example of how, rhetoric does not always match up with the reality that especially exists in a lot of the conservative imagination, in this case, specifically about trans people. And how, at least 26 Republicans, their hearts grew 3 sizes that day. So, powerful speeches from trans Dems flipped 29 Republicans. Anti-trans bills die in Montana. This is from Aaron Reed, published on March 6th. Something remarkable happened in Montana. As has become routine, anti-trans bills were up for debate. The state has spent more than half of its legislative days this session pushing such bills through committees and the House floor, with Republicans largely voting in lockstep. But something changed. A week ago, transgender Representative Zoe Zephyr delivered a powerful speech against a bill that would create a separate incident exposure law for transgender people. Since then, momentum on the House floor slowed. Today, 2 of the most extreme bills targeting the transgender community came up for a vote. Transgender Representatives Zoe Zephyr and S.J. Howell gave impassioned speeches. This time, they broke through. In a stunning turn, 29 Republicans defected, killing both bills. One Republican even took to the floor to deliver a scathing rebuke of the bill's sponsor. The first bill to reach the House floor was HB 675, a measure that would ban drag performances and pride parades in Montana. A previous drag ban had already been struck down by the courts after it was enforced against a transgender woman, who was not a drag artist, to prevent her from speaking about public history at a library. In response, the bill's sponsor, Representative Caleb Hinkle, introduced HB 675 to circumvent that ruling. Rather than relying on state enforcement, this bill would grant individuals the private right to sue if a public drag performance took place, making it more difficult to challenge in court. During committee hearings, Hinkle went even further, calling being transgender a fetish and arguing that the law was necessary to prevent trans people from dancing in public. And that's when transgender Representative Zoe Zephyr took the floor. Here I am once again to rise on another bill targeting the LGBTQ plus community, she said, exasperated. At its very core, drag is art. It is very beautiful art. It has a deep history in this country, and it is important to my community. You know, if you are a woman in this body wearing a suit today, you are in some way challenging gender norms that existed long ago. There were 3 article of clothing laws 50 years ago that said if you wore 3 articles of clothing that were indicative of the opposite gender, they could stop you, arrest you. It was those laws that led to the police raiding an LGBTQ plus bar that led to the Stonewall riots, one of the most important civil rights moments in my community's history, she began. When the sponsor closed on this bill, he said, "This bill is needed," and I quote his words, "because transgenderism is a fetish based on cross-dressing. And I'm here to stand before the body and say that my life is not a fetish. My existence is not a fetish. I was proud within a month ago to have my son up in the gallery here. Many of you on the other side met him. When I go to walk him to school, that's not a lascivious display. That is not a fetish. That is my family. This is what these bills are trying to come after. Not obscene shows in front of children. We have the Miller test for that. We have laws for that. This is a way to target the trans community, and that is in my opinion and in the speaker's own words." Then something even more remarkable happened. A Republican, Representative Sherry Essman, rose to defend Representative Zephyr and chastised the bill's sponsor. "I'm speaking as a parent and a grandmother. I'm very emotional because I know the representative in seat 20 is also a parent. No matter what you think of that, she is doing her best to raise a child. I did my best to raise the children as I saw fit, and I'm taking it for granted that my children are going to raise my grandchildren as they see fit," she began. Everybody in here talks about how important parental rights are. I want to tell you, in addition to parental rights, parental responsibility is also important. And if you can't trust a decent parent to decide where and when their kids should see what, then we have a bigger problem. She turned to parental rights and spoke about how people who claim those rights should vote against the bill. And then she closed by chastising the bill's sponsor for bringing the bill. "Trust the parents to do what's right and stop these crazy bills that are a waste of time. They're a waste of energy. We should be working on property tax relief and not doing this sort of business on the floor of the House and having to even talk about this." Following the speeches, 13 Republicans, the most of any anti-trans bill this cycle, flipped and voted against the bill. Were this all that happened, it would have been remarkable enough. Such aisle crossing has become rare in modern politics, and on transgender issues, it is almost unheard of. But Representative Zephyr is not the only transgender lawmaker in Montana. Representative F.G. Howell, a powerhouse in their own right, took the floor when an even more extreme bill followed immediately afterwards, HB 754, a measure that would remove transgender children from their parents. They had a powerful speech to deliver as well. "I stand to oppose this bill. When a state intervenes to remove a child from their family, that is one of the most serious and weighty responsibilities that the state has. That is not something to be taken lightly. Every time a child is removed from their family, it's a tragedy. Sometimes a necessary tragedy, but a tragedy nonetheless. This bill does not come close to the seriousness with which those decisions should be contemplated." On page 1, line 19, any child protective service specialist, peace officer, or county attorney who has any reason to believe any child is in immediate danger or harm may immediately remove the child. What we are adding is a child transitioning gender with the support of a parent or guardian is considered immediate or apparent danger or harm. Transitioning gender is not defined in this bill. So what does that mean? Maybe it means, as the sponsor said, surgery or medical treatment. Maybe it means therapy, mental health care. Maybe it means a kid who gets a haircut and a new set of clothes. Maybe a name change, a legal name change, or someone who wants to try out a different name. A strict reading of this bill could include all of that. Put yourself in the shoes of a CPS worker who is confronted with a young person, 15 years old maybe, who is happy, healthy, living in a stable home with loving parents, who is supported and has their needs met. And they are supposed to remove that child from their home and put them in the care of the state? We should absolutely not be doing that. Then the bill went to a vote. This time, the Montana Republican Party fully fractured. 29 Republicans crossed the aisle to defeat it. You can find that on Aaron Reed's Aaron in the Morning blog. That was powerful speeches from trans Dems flip 29 Republicans. Anti-trans bills die in Montana. Thank you for listening to Media Cyphers. I want to once again thank Bill Farmer for coming on the show to talk about Medicare for All and his work with Southwest Michigan DSA. Thank you to Lawrence for joining me to talk about the state of disunion. And a shout out to the wider team. We just got voted best college radio station in the nation, which I think has been true since I've been here, since 2006. But I'm glad that the rest of the country is now finally giving us the recognition we deserve. Shout out to the wider team for winning some fantastic awards over at the International Broadcasting uh, System Awards. Keep your dial locked. Electropop therapy is next. Y'all have been listening to my media ciphers. Until next time, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.